Now, the Bible never says that labor is a bad thing. Work's never denigrated, but the Bible does say even something as noble and necessary as work, you need to just have a schedule where at least one day a week you stop it and you do something entirely different.
This podcast is brought to you by Blackaby Ministries International. To find out more, visit blackaby.org.
Well, welcome to the Richard Blackaby Leadership Podcast. My name is Sam Camp, and I'm your host. And helping take our leadership to the next level, we have Dr. Richard Blackaby.
Always my privilege, Sam.
It's always a pleasure to have you, Richard. Before we dive into today's show, I thought we'd mention a couple of important dates that are coming up, fast approaching on this calendar of 2025. And that is, first of all, you're going to be at the Cove. We've been talking about that a lot.
Yeah, it's going to be a great group there. So
yeah, it's exciting. We've got a lot of folks signed up for it. I know accommodations on campus are full, but you can sign up for the wait list, and there's several options to stay nearby and still
and I know
attend.
several that are staying at a Holiday Inn real nearby by that, the Cove, or there's a Hampton Inn nearby, and you can stay there, and it might be cheaper if you've got any points or anything, and
sure.
But you can still eat at the Cove, which is always delightful.
Yeah, you can do the eat, or you can pack a lunch and just attend the seminar, which I think is free.
They say free, and there's a few dollars for, I think, some materials.
Very inexpensive.
Yeah, like $15 or something.
Yeah. So we'll leave links to sign up for that. And that's going to be March 24th to the 26th.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have links for that. And then also we do about 2 of these a year, sometimes quite a few more, just depending on the demand.
Yeah.
But we have our coaching workshop, and this year, this spring, it's going to be March 31st to April 2nd, and that's going to be at Johnson Ferry Baptist Church. That's in North Atlanta. And we usually do one in the fall in Jonesboro, just south of Atlanta. And so we've been kind of the past few years now kind of bouncing back and forth between the North Atlanta and South Atlanta.
Yeah, because there's quite a distance between the two.
There is, yeah, because either way you have to go through Atlanta, and so that's a bit of a bear depending on where you're coming from.
But Johnson Ferry is a great church, and they do a great job hosting, and so it's a really good setup. If maybe North Atlanta is a little more convenient for you.
Yeah. It's a great spot. Great folks up there. We've already got quite a few signed up, and I think through the end of I'll have to look at the dates, but I know there's going to be an early bird special. So if you sign up as you're hearing this, you'll probably be able to save a little bit of money on that one as well. And as always, we'll put links to that in the show notes.
Yeah.
Well, with all that out of the way, Richard.
You must be tired.
I am. I'm going to go take a nap and let you do the rest of the talking.
Well, I thought today, Sam, we would go back to something very, very basic and I found, especially when it comes to trying to base your leadership on Scripture, that it's like a lot of things in sports and other things. You need to go back to the basics. And the basics can seem just so basic. It's like, oh, yeah, I know that. And yet there's so many dimensions built into that. And so today I thought we would look at one of the Big Ten commandments, commandment number 4, and it's about remembering the Sabbath. And so if you remember, and we may even just do a couple of these, we'll just see how that goes. But you remember that the first 3 commandments, first one is just don't have any other gods besides me. That's pretty straightforward. We kind of are not surprised to find that in the Big Ten. And then the second one is don't make any image of a god. And, of course, that includes don't make an idol of a false god. But I think it also means don't make an image of the true God. God is invisible. He's a spirit. And for a lot of folks, we need to see something a little more tangible. We want to be able to know what God looks like and be able to look at him when we worship him, and even if it's just an idol, an image of who the real God is. And so God says don't do that because, for one thing, the moment you make any kind of image of God, you have just downsized the reality. We can't even imagine the scope, the magnitude, the majesty of God. And so we're forbidden from doing that. And we might talk about that sometime, Sam, because a lot of people wonder about What about paintings of Jesus or TV series like The Chosen?
Yeah.
The moment that you portray Jesus, maybe even in a stained glass window, is that an image? Should you do any of that?
Well, this was one of the big, sort of dividings between, of course, they had other issues as well, but with Protestants and the Catholic Church, Protestant churches being very plain, unadorned.
Yeah.
Sort of the counter to the sort of ornate and very artistically rendered Catholic churches and cathedrals.
And the problem, of course, is that the moment you have some work of art, some beautiful image, you can begin to revere it to the point of worship, and it does become an idol at that point to you. And so that's a third one, or second one. Then the third one is just don't take the Lord's name in vain. And again, we could easily give a whole podcast to what that means. Just by treating God's character, his name, of course, represents his character. And when you treat the character of God, the nature of God lightly, as if it doesn't carry much weight. And there's, of course, lots of ways we can inadvertently do that. And so the first three commandments basically really safeguard the way that we treat God, the way we worship him, represent him, and so on. And really the fourth one just falls right in line with that. So God, he begins, of course, vertically. The first four or so commandments, it's all about our relationship with God. It's been called our vertical relationship from us upward toward God. And then it's going to go out horizontally into our relationships with others. But the fourth one is one we want to focus on today, and that is about the Sabbath. And so Exodus chapter 20, where you can find those, beginning of verse 8, it says, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. You are to labor 6 days and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You must not do any work, you, your son or your daughter, your male or female servant, your livestock, or the resident alien who is within your city gates. For the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and everything in them in 6 days. Then he rested on the seventh day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and declared it holy." And so, by the way, this is the longest section. In Hebrew, this section literally is called the 10 words. It's not very lengthy for the most part. Some of them, like "don't kill," I think, is just really 2 Hebrew words. But this takes several verses. Really, it gets the most print of all the 10 commandments, and so that I think that ought to give us pause to say that maybe it's important to God. He spells it out a little bit. He even gives theological justification for it, which he doesn't do for a lot of the other ones. Mm-hmm. Certainly, "thou shalt not kill." You could have had a basis for that with the image of God and man or something like that, But here God does spell it out, and yet I think a lot of times for a lot of Christians today, we may treat this one the most lightly. We kind of feel like, well, I go to church on the weekend, so I keep the Sabbath. But obviously, it's a lot more than that, and I think God is concerned about a lot more than our church attendance. And so I want us just to look a little bit at what it means. What was God getting at, and how especially does it apply to leaders? Because the word Sabbath essentially means to cease or to stop. It means that whatever you were doing, whatever you were in the habit of doing, bring it to a complete stop. Don't slow down like you're going through a speed zone in the school zone. Yeah. Keep on going. Just maybe let off the gas a little bit. The idea of ceasing means you just completely stop.
Right.
Whatever it was you were doing, you're not doing that anymore. And of course, this is going to be given to a bunch of basically farmers. I mean, they're sort of nomads at the moment, but they all take care of livestock. They may have goats or sheep and different things that they have to care for. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that they just stop everything. Otherwise, they'd have a lot of dead livestock every weekend.
Right.
Or the livestock might get in trouble and they couldn't rescue it. And so they sort of understand that God is kind of saying everything that you possibly, if it's not a matter of life and death for an animal or someone else, then just stop it for at least one day a week. Just stop your working, your labor. Now, the Bible never says that labor is a bad thing. Work's never denigrated, but the Bible does say even something as noble and necessary as work, you need to just have a schedule where at least one day a week you stop it and you do something entirely different. And I think it is interesting, too, that here in this passage, something I hadn't really noticed before is that it says, even your slaves. Now, it'd be one thing if you're a rich landowner and you decide to take the Sabbath off every week, but you got your servants out there still working away. We could take time off, or maybe we're the boss, and so we go golfing on the Sabbath and relax, but we got a lot of people still in the office getting the job done. It sort of defeats the purpose. If it's not just saying if you're in management, take time off. It's saying everybody needs to take time off, and it goes to say so your servants as well. And now your servants in that day, they might have been Hebrews, but they might have also been foreigners. In fact, it even says here if there are aliens that live among you, and of course aliens, oftentimes that means people that don't have your religion. And so they may not even believe in the Sabbath. In their religion, it might not even command them to do that. But it's saying, but let them off too. In fact, it even says, give your animals a day off. So if you've got an ox that's normally plowing fields for you and doing other kind of labor, even your animals need a day off. And perhaps you might say in our culture today, turn the machines off. Turn the printing press off, or whatever it is that you use. Let that truck sit idle for a day before you rev it back up and get back to work. The machinery you use, if you work it 24/7, 7 days a week, it's you're going to wear it out faster as well. It's just saying that everything needs a break, and so. To realize that, and of course, this is our Creator who is commanding this. He made us, so he knows how we can get the maximum fruitfulness, effectiveness out of who we are, how we're wired. He's the one who put all the instructions together in the operating manual for people, and he's saying you're not designed to work all the time. And I'll tell you, this is kind of more of my struggle. I think a lot of leaders, especially if you're task oriented, you always have before you unfinished tasks, things that haven't been done yet, and it almost seems scandalous somehow to be sitting around maybe on a Sunday afternoon when you could just be checking your emails and maybe working on some projects that you took home for the weekend. But God here is saying, no, you need to discipline yourself to truly stop where you're, and a lot of you, I'm sure, can identify where your mind is going all the time. Even if you're not technically working at something, you're thinking about it. You're preparing. You're worrying about it. You're wondering what you're going to do on Monday. And so your mind is not resting. It's still working. And sometimes even at night, lying in bed, you can be churning and tossing, thinking about the work that you have to do the next day. And God is just saying that for you to be healthy, at some point you got to turn that work brain off. You got to just turn things off and say, I need a break at this point. And I don't think it's, some people have looked at this and become very legalistic, and they've said, I know just over the years, certain Christian traditions have said, yeah, on the Sabbath, you can't, maybe you can't, there in years past, maybe generations past, they might say, well, you shouldn't, you have to eat. You can't just not eat on the Sabbath, but you don't have to necessarily stoke up the fire in your wood stove and cook a real hot meal. Maybe it's just all cold. Maybe it's leftovers. So you have to eat, but you make enough on the day before that you can just kind of coast on leftovers for a day, so that the women, especially, or whoever it is that does the cooking, doesn't have to be slaving away in the kitchen. And you know, there might be some merit to that. You know, I know growing up, my mother used to love making a big roast beef dinner on Sunday, and I certainly enjoyed eating them. But that created a lot of dishes and a lot of pots and pans, a lot of labor that went into cleaning all those dishes up afterward and straightening up the kitchen, and the labor of putting it all together. It was quite a bit of work to get that wonderful meal together that we would wolf down. And so there were some that just said, yeah, we need to do that. And some people, that's why maybe they go out to eat every Sunday afternoon. But then there's others who say, yeah, but if you go out to eat, then you're causing all the table servers and the cooks in the restaurants to be having to labor on the Sabbath. And so I know a lot of people have just really wrestled with some of the legalism of that. But I think in large part what it's saying is just shut down as much as you can of your work brain, your work emotions, your work thoughts. Just physically kick back and do something that fills up the tank again. And, you know, I think especially in our generation now, there's so many stresses that come with work, so many problems that can crop up, so many different issues, misunderstandings, customers that are upset with you, an employee who's underperforming. You're going to have to confront them, just travel hassles, canceled flight. It doesn't take long before emotionally you're being drained. There's a colleague in the cubicle next to you that's just really irritating, and it's just getting on your nerves every day, having to put up with this person with a little shortage of people skills and whatever it might be. I think we often just don't realize what kind of drain is happening on our emotions, and it could be physically as well. Just I've been sitting at my desk all week. I really maybe need a day to get outside, go for a walk or a run. Go for a hike, just do something to refresh myself. And it's just funny how the brain works. Sometimes just simply not thinking about something for 24 hours, when you get back to it, all of a sudden, you know, maybe at the end of the week, you were kind of stumped with some problems that you were trying to figure out. And you got to the weekend and just determined, I'm just not going to keep worrying about it all weekend. I'll sort of turn my attention back to it on Monday morning. And then when you got to it Monday morning, you suddenly had fresh eyes, new energy, more creativity, and what was stumping you on Friday seems pretty clear to you on Monday. And I think we've just kind of seen that, Sam, where, you know, you're doing the same job, but in one case you're refreshed and have got energy, and at the other, you're piling one more task at the end of a long week, and you just know it's just. And I've certainly been there where it's like, I know there's a solution to this, but I'm just kind of worn out. And even if I come up with a solution, it's probably going to be a third-rate solution right now. But if I stop this and just rest, when I get back to it, I know I'm going to come up with a lot better product.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think that with taking Sabbath, it's really just a reorienting of your whole life. Because I think to honor the Sabbath, it requires a bit of planning and a bit of reorienting of the rest of the other 6 days.
Yeah.
Because I think one thing that can be overwhelming is like, well, if I just stop on day 7, then I'm just going to create this backlog of things that are going to be overwhelming when day 1 comes around again.
Yeah.
When Monday hits, I'm going to be, behind just out of the gate. And I think at least in our family, what we have tried to do is just orient our life in such a way that we are prepared to take a Sabbath. And I think that can be very freeing too, because I'm very task oriented like you. And so I think you need to give yourself that permission to say, I'm not going to open the emails. I'm not going to work on things.
Yeah.
Even if it's just a couple things here and there, that you need that permission sometimes.
Yeah, and I don't know what you guys ended up doing for lunch yesterday, but walking out of church with your 6-year-old, I was asking her what you guys were going to eat for lunch, and I think she mentioned some kind of leftovers that you guys had.
Yeah, well, that's been one area I think that we've kind of dialed in pretty well, and that is like for breakfast we have leftover pancakes, because we always do pancakes on Saturday mornings. So Sunday morning we have leftover pancakes, and then Sunday lunch we have leftover pizza, because we make pizza on Friday nights. And so those 2 meals are done, and typically we've done something Saturday night that has leftovers for Sunday night. And that's a huge thing, because my wife does most of the cooking, and that's such a huge burden off of her to have to worry.
Yeah,
and it's just so much faster and it's so much easier.
Well, when you have 2 young mean, there's a different stage of life where you've got more time like that. But when you've got kids, and maybe you've been at church all morning, like for us churchgoers, by the time you get home and you pack up 2 kids, collect them from
it certainly doesn't feel like a Sabbath. I'll say that.
And so you get home, and then if you got to think, okay, what am I going to cook? What do we eat today?
Yeah.
But if you already know as you walk in the door, okay, throw this in the oven, and while we're getting changed, it'll be ready. Just finding creative ways of saying, how do I give myself a bit of a break? And I know for your wife, she makes her own homemade sourdough crust for her pizza. It's not like
good pizza. Yeah,
it's not like you just.
We're not just microwaving frozen
if you're
pizza.
doing that twice a week, that could be a lot of work. But you do it once, you do it well, and then you got something worth heating up a second time. But
and I will say too, with the kids, it seems impossible to have any sort of Sabbath. Because it's like you can't, unless you just ship the kids off, you can't not be a parent on the 7th day of the week. But one thing that we have even started doing is we kind of tag team it Sunday afternoons. And so I'm able to just, whatever fills my cup, I'm going to go do for an hour.
Yeah.
And then vice versa. And so, I'll have the kids and whatever she wants to do, whether that's, go for a run or read a book or whatever, we're able to at least have those moments in the broader Sabbath to really kind of be able to feel like we've rested.
Yeah, and I think, the Jews, of course, later, the Pharisees and the scribes and so on, they began to really spell this all out, to say, okay, well, not working means that you can't walk more than this distance, or you can't lift more than this weight or whatever. And of course, even to this day, if you're in Israel and you want to get on an elevator, they have elevators that just automatically stop at every floor on Sabbath, so that you don't have to work and push a button. And so it's like, well, okay, but the actual text, even though there's a couple of verses devoted to it, intentionally stays pretty sparse as far as specific details.
Right.
I think it's kind of saying, you figure a lot of this out. And if 2 parents have to just spell each other off so that each one, maybe you give your wife time at night to soak in a hot or a bathtub with reading a book and lighting a candle, but then she's going to take them when you just need to go and just kind of get away for a little bit in the afternoon. Like I think it may not work out to a 24-hour period of complete cessation of work when you have preschool kids, whatever, but can you find those moments where you say, for the next hour, this afternoon or whatever?
And I think, for us, a big part of it is just setting ourselves up to be able to do that. And I think that's what we have discovered because, I've read good books on the Sabbath. John Mark Comer has a great book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, which is, extremely convicting and all those kind of things. But sometimes you read some of these things about how, what should a Sabbath look like? And you're like, you're miles from what
Yeah.
the author is doing, or that may never work in your context. And so I think part of it is just, okay, so given the parameters that we have, what makes them the most amount of sense for us to be able to have the maximum amount of Sabbath. And I think it may look different, and it will look different, I think, in different stages of life and with different families.
Yeah, and I think just the fact here, it says too, if you're a leader, if you're in management, you also need just to be concerned about your employees. Sometimes we're kind of delighted that we've got workaholic employees who are just constantly working all the time because they can produce a lot. But I think part of this means too that we're concerned about others, that we're concerned that they're not wearing themselves out, even if they're working on our behalf. And I think good leaders insist that their people take Sabbath too. And I've mentioned this before, but there were some times where I literally told an employee to go home, that it was past the end of the workday, but they were thinking about just still doing one more project. But I knew that this man had some young kids at home and a wife ready for him to get home. And sometimes, as a boss, you just have to give people permission to say that this is enough. Quit. This can all be waiting for you on Monday. You'll have time then. But as a leader, I would say be diligent to make sure that your staff are having Sabbaths too. And now for some people, that's not the problem. Maybe they take too many unofficial Sabbaths. They're constantly stopping working. But for a lot of folks, they're wired to work hard, and they almost feel, I know there's people that feel guilty about stopping working. And that is, I think, another issue in recent years with so many people shifting to work from home. If you've got an office at home, now there's certainly some that end up getting very distracted, and they don't get a lot of work done in the day because all their personal life is in front of them. But for a lot of folks like me, when I've got an office just downstairs, if I've got nothing else to do, if my wife is ready to go watch a favorite YouTuber, and we got dinner done, the dishes done, it's just pretty easy to walk downstairs and just knock off a few more projects and work on a book or something. And there are times where I think people just need permission, maybe even exhortation to just do something more relaxing. For me, sometimes, and it could be as simple as, instead of going and writing on a book, pick up a classic novel and just read a book. That to me, that's I've stopped my production now. Now I've shifted just to enjoyment. And so, but be diligent to look out for your people as well. And it's kind of like the Old Testament concept of tithing, where you took 10% of your income and you gave it to God. And now you've got to trust God that with only 90% of your income, you're still going to be able to pay all your bills and do all that you need to do. And in a sense, that's the same thing with a Sabbath. You're taking a seventh of your work time, and you're saying, I'm not going to use that to be productive and do what I do the other 6 days. And so I'm going to have to trust God that with essentially less time, I can still get everything done that I feel I need to. And so whether it's tithing, whether it's taking the Sabbath, I think these principles, when God first instituted them, was saying, I want you to live a life of faith where you're sort of making room for me. So you're saying, okay, God, I'm going to take the Sabbath, but I'm going to have to trust you that I get all my work done. Or I'm going to write this check and give it to you, but I'm going to have to trust you that I can pay all my bills. And so the Sabbath is kind of a statement of faith, saying I trust God for this. And then maybe just one other thing with that is to say, what I find is when you get tired, it's like the law of diminishing returns. When I'm tired, I might actually put more hours into a project, but get less done. And then when I'm feeling refreshed, invigorated, when my creative juices are flowing, then I actually get more done with less time. And so It's just not. It's like the old adage of just sharpening the saw or the axe.
Yeah.
You can keep on hacking away at that tree trunk, but when your axe is dull, you'll work yourself into lather and not make much progress. But you give your axe a break, sharpen it up, get everything back in place, and then when you go back to chopping again, you're swinging a lot less, you're putting out a lot less effort, you're getting way more production. So I've just found for myself, especially if you're in a field of work that requires creativity, problem solving, visionary kind of thinking, that requires you to be sharp, especially if you're in a competitive business where there's other people in your competitors all trying to come up with the right solutions too. And so you can't just do shabby thinking. You've got to be at your very best. And so that's what the Sabbath does. It says, refresh yourself, fill your tanks back up, sharpen the saw, get your strength back to 100%. And that's how you need to be functioning. And just the last thing just to say with that is the Bible says in those verses, there's really two aspects to it, and we've kind of focused mostly on the ceasing from work. But the other is that it says the Sabbath is holy, which means it belongs to God. God is saying one day a week of yours belongs to me. And of course, that doesn't mean that you just spend the whole day in church, although some traditions that would seem like we did spend a lot of time there. Mm-hmm. But it just means that on that day, it at least one day, I mean, you should be thinking about God every day, but at least one day you have more time because you don't have the press of your normal work so that you can really focus. You can worship. You can read your Bible. You can meditate. And so I, for one, typically I set my alarm. Usually I'm kind of a 6 o'clock riser, but I rise at 6 o'clock on Saturday and Sunday too. And Sunday, I've got some things. I teach a life group that you're in as well, Sam. But so I've got a few things I need to sort of prepare for. But I just find that if I get up at the same time, I may not be physically resting as much, but I find it very invigorating just to have a couple of hours before. We usually leave for church around 9 o'clock or so, but that means that I've got a couple of hours of unhurried, undistracted time just to have my Bible open, just to get an extra soaking, if you will. Yeah, if you've ever watered dry grass, sometimes you don't want to just give it a light little, drizzle. You want to soak it deep, and sometimes that's kind of what the Sabbath is for. It's just a chance to soak deep in God and His Word, to have more time to maybe pray, and just kind of really soak in God and focusing on Him, so that when you go in on Monday morning, you're filled up, not just rested up, but you're also just really walking in the Spirit. You've addressed issues, you've thought through things, you've presented issues to God, and He's helped you get perspective, and so now you're ready to go. And so, Sam, just thought it would be good just to maybe take a little bit of time. If some of our listeners are kind of wired like me, then you just maybe need permission to stop some things. And the Sabbath is a lot more than just not going into the office one day. It is saying there's a lot of other work. There's a lot of labor, a lot of draining kinds of activities that I do when I'm home. Sometimes that's what Saturdays can be. Maybe we haven't been in the office since Friday afternoon, but Saturday we got lots of chores to do, and we can work hard all day Saturday, and it's just more labor. Just maybe it's labor at our house, but there ought to be one day where we just sort of tell ourselves, today I need a break. I'm not going to roll up my sleeves and do a lot of physical labor. I know I've got lots of work to do, but I think just physically, emotionally, spiritually, my tank is a little bit drained. And so today I'm just going to take time to fill it back up. And then I'll hit the ground running on Monday. But for our listeners, maybe as we're about a month into the new year or so now, there's still time to make some adjustments to the rhythms of your life, to the schedule of your life, so that they're sustainable. so that you don't end up exhausted, kind of limping into your 2-week vacation sometime in the summer, or you just counting the minutes until you can retire, utterly exhausted from just a frenetic work schedule that lasted for years. But God kind of wires us to go the long haul. And so if you've got healthy rhythms, you can go year in and year out and still be fruitful, productive, and joyful. Because God designed us to work, but he wants us to work his way. And working his way includes the Sabbath as well.
Yeah, well, lots more could be said about the Sabbath, but we hope that you will at least take a Sabbath, or at least begin to make a plan to better utilize that day of the week. And until next time.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. If this is something you enjoyed, it really makes a difference if you leave a review and a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends. We always love hearing from our listeners, so email us at podcast@blackaby.org.